I started playing Ocarina of Time again a couple of days ago, and I've just been blasting through the entire game, having an absolute ball. Even almost 30 years later, the game still holds up as the pinnacle of 3D game design, one of the greatest games of all time, and an absolute gem on Nintendo 64. The game still holds up, and it's been really great coming back to the game and re-experiencing it and evaluating it, talking about how much has changed, like what the games were like back then and how cutting edge this game was at the time, how dated it is now, and how it still remains relatively timeless. And one of the interesting conversations that came up during my playthrough was this debate on what the best dungeons were, because I was asked a while back about what my favorite dungeons in the game were, and I honestly didn't really have any idea, because traditionally I've always felt that like all the dungeons were good, all of them offered a whole lot, all of them just kind of delivered a lot of fun original gameplay concepts and mechanics, right? The entire game is a masterpiece. But the more I thought about it, I did have an issue with how straightforward the trial dungeons were. Like, so many of them feel as if they're basically just tutorials. Like, I would argue that, like, maybe Jabu Jabu is, like, a real legit dungeon, but, like, the rest just feel, like, so trivial and so simplistic, and I'm just, like, I just didn't really know how I would rank the dungeons. And one of the things I came up with initially was this idea that the dungeons get progressively worse as you go on, because my favorite dungeon in the game is the Forest Temple. I love the vibe. I love the spooky atmosphere. I love like all the mechanics. I love like the iconic moments. Like, for me, the Forest Temple is just a lot of fond memories of that one, and I'm very, very attached to the location. But I really do feel like for most of the temples, it really is a matter of preference, right? The water temple is built like a labyrinth. The fire temple has all these like really interesting like elevation aspects to it, right? It has all these multiple floors and like all these like different paths you could take. And the Spirit Temple has, like, some really cool iconography and the unique gimmick of going through it as both a child and an adult. But the odd man out was the Shadow Temple. Like, even before I'd actually played it, I was kind of coming out saying that, like, I don't know, guys. I think the Shadow Temple is the worst one. I think it really pales in comparison to the other dungeons. And this is the final dungeon you play before Ganon's Tower, if you're not an idiot. This is the final area in the game before the climax and the finale. And I wondered if like that might have something to do with it, if it's suffering from like Twilight Princess syndrome or whatever. Like, it just feels as if this is the dungeon where they dumped a ton of like unused concepts into one like attempt at like a cohesive narrative. It's kind of weird, playing this dungeon and seeing how straightforward and linear it is, even though it's supposedly about illusions. Okay, there are a lot of false walls. There's a lot of hidden keys. There's a lot of like things that don't make going forward all that straightforward. But by and large, if you know what you're doing, like the entire dungeon is kind of a straight line. And it really feels as if, like, if you don't get sidetracked by, like, the pointless aspects of the dungeon, you're going to make your way straight to the boss and beat it, like, reasonably quickly. I believe more quickly than any other dungeon in the game. And considering all the weird aspects of this, the Stalfos that are here, considering the Gibdos that are basically just reskinned Redeads, considering how like most of the obstacles and enemies you meet are ones you've encountered already or have dealt with already, like the Shadow Temple comes off like it's just padding in a lot of ways. The dungeon's core concept, the gimmick of the illusions, it's not something that you'll ever fall for on a repeat playthrough, because I saw this happen to me a couple of times where I got confused for a couple of seconds, like, oh yeah, do I need to bomb this, or do I need to like look at it with the lens of truth or whatever? But like once you understand like what's going on with this dungeon once you like get through some of the weird aspects of it. It's all very straightforward and you can go straight to the end. However, that's on repeat playthroughs. On a first playthrough, is the Shadow Temple a good dungeon? And the simple answer is yes. On a first playthrough, you will not know where you're going. You will not know what to do. Like the wide open, huge spaces don't make it apparent as to like how to make it through the dungeon. And there's quite a lot of things that happen in it that don't have any clear solution. Like that bit at the end where like you're there's just all these spikes coming at you. Like it's not really intuitive to use Din's fire to like burn them away and just like save yourself. It's something you kind of have to figure out for yourself. The Shadow Temple, in my opinion, is a rather minimalist dungeon that relies on the concept of illusion to fool players. But the illusions, once you know that they're there and how they work and how they operate, they're not something that you'll ever fall for again. So on a first playthrough, when you go into it blind, you'll have no idea what you're dealing with these rooms or what to deal with them or like how to engage with some of this stuff or like make your way through. You're going to fall into these weird traps. You're going to go for like you're going to walk into like the rooms with the numerous dead ends, right? You're going to be like walking in circles for a long while until you figure out like until you figure things out. But on a second playthrough, you'll remember a lot of this stuff and just like breeze through it. Like it's just not the sort of gimmick that lends itself well to repeat playthroughs. I noticed this when I was playing the Forest Temple, the Fire Temple, and the Water Temple, where all of them have all of these keys that are hidden in all these like really well hidden areas, and it's very easy to overlook them and not find them right away. Like it is very easy to forget steps and like come across a locked door and like backtrack and like try to make corrections and try to make your way through the dungeon properly, right? Like I saw myself go through that process a lot on this playthrough where there were a couple of times where I just completely forgot to do something and I had to backtrack real quick, and I was really marveling at the level design of those dungeons. It felt as if even today I still found myself kind of bamboozled by what they offered. But the Shadow Temple, in comparison, it's too focused on its one gimmick. Like once you like get through the illusions, once you remember like all of the weird oddball things it throws at you, like with the invisible chests and that weird fan that blows you through like at a wall, right? Once you get through like those kinds of things, once you start processing what this dungeon like is trying to do, like it all becomes very straightforward, more so than the other dungeons. But this doesn't make the dungeon bad. If anything, it makes it very distinct from the other dungeons. The tone of this dungeon is really great with this dark, foreboding atmosphere. You know, you get like lots of really cool like encounters with Stalfos. You have this really cool boss fight. Like again, when all is said and done, it's still a really solid dungeon. It's just one of those unfortunate circumstances in which the completely original concept that's found pretty much nowhere else in the game, at least not to this extent, is just not all that replayable, and it's just not something that you really look forward to on repeat playthroughs. Like, honestly, like looking back on this, I honestly see this temple as the most fun thing about it being all the crazy platforming. You know, all the times you have to jump across these chasms with the hover boots and just, jumping off the ship at the end. It's like, it's all very, very creative, and it's something that I wish they did a lot more with. Again, I do feel like this is by far the worst out of the 5 adult dungeons. But that by no means makes it bad. If anything, I kind of appreciate it for deviating from what works from the other 3 dungeons as well. Because I think if this was designed more like the other temples, like it would have made the game feel stale and derivative and uninspired. Like, at the very least, every time you go to the Shadow Temple, you can expect a wildly different tone. You can expect all these wild, crazy rooms. You can expect a lot of intense combat encounters, and you can expect a pretty good boss fight. Like, again, being the worst dungeon in the greatest game ever made is not really a criticism of it. It's more like an observation. There are plenty of things I love about the Shadow Temple and look back on fondly. If anything, I think it might be the most memorable of the 5 dungeons because of just how unusual some of the level layouts and design choices are. Like, for example, I remember being baffled as a kid when I realized how quickly you can get the hover boots and how essential they were for like the entire dungeon. Okay, can you name any other Zelda dungeon that hands you the item immediately and then designs the entire dungeon around it? Like, it's just not something that they do all that often. Like, the simple fact of the matter is, the Shadow Temple is a very unique, interesting location with some of the most interesting lore in the entire game, and is something that, like, I really, really love and appreciate in spite of how short and straightforward it can be for a more experienced player. And that's been a really interesting thing about my Ocarina of Time playthrough in general, is that I know this game back to front. I know everything about it. You know, I've been experiencing this game for probably like the dozenth time. Okay, I've played this game over and over again for the past 30 years. It's one of my all-time favorite games. I know everything about it. I can breeze through the entire thing. And I'm still playing it. I still appreciate it for what it does. I still enjoy it. I still look back on it fondly. It's still one of my all-time favorites. Like, and I think that's what makes it such a spectacular game, is that it doesn't need to be all that challenging. It doesn't need to offer things I've never seen before, because in a lot of ways, there was a time in which I had never seen it before. There was a time in which I was going into this completely blind. And when I did that, when I played through the game for the first time, it was the greatest game ever made. Like, again, the game even now still surprises me to a certain extent with how interesting the level design is and just how well it's aged. And it's true that I'll never play the game for the first time again, but that's certainly not a knock against it, and it shouldn't be seen as a criticism. The Shadow Temple is a phenomenal dungeon and very well may be a first-time player's favorite level, but for me personally, as someone who's played this game a million times, it's something that needs to be pointed out that maybe this isn't quite as good as the rest of the game.